FSU and Clemson officially dropped their lawsuit against the ACC, which of course means they'd never leave, right?
You are Locked On College Football with Spencer McLaughlin, your daily podcast on all things college football. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Locked On College Football. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin, and thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and your daily source to stay up to date with the biggest stories in this, the greatest and craziest sport on planet Earth. What's good for the SEC in the playoff? I talked with Chris Gordy of Locked On SEC, and Tommy Tofi did not go where I was expecting him to. That's all on today's show, which is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So, the biggest story yesterday is that FSU and Clemson officially dropped the lawsuit against the ACC. They're not suing till they've formally ended the process, meaning they would never leave, right? That would never happen. That entirely depends on how the changes I've been talking about, along with everybody else for the last couple of weeks on the show, play out in the coming years. Because Florida State and Clemson, you can look at this and say they were just trying to get more money out of the ACC. I think that's probably true. I don't think the intention, sure, they poked around, they went on a few dates with the idea. They never bought an engagement ring to the idea of leaving the ACC. They were trying to get more money because they feel, hey, why are we getting the same revenue share as Wake Forest? Why are we getting the same thing as Syracuse, as Boston College? Why exactly is that happening? And they're not the only schools, they're not the first schools, nor will they be the last in big conferences across the country to ask that sort of question. You've had Boise State for years, had an unequal share of revenue in the Mountain West. They're leaving anyway, but USC wanted that in the Pac-12. They went to the Big Ten. So it's not a new idea. And this whole play, billable hours are undefeated. I mean, undefeated. The most consistent theme over the last almost 3 years since all this craziness began. Man, lawyers are doing well. They're doing really, really well for themselves. And you know what? They have a hard job. So, yeah, they should get paid for it. Like college players, right? Okay, I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole, but I will go down this one. Florida State and Clemson are not done with the idea of leaving the ACC. They are done for now and for the next several years. Does that mean new developments won't arise one day? No. What it does mean is that they negotiated all of this to get more money from the ACC, and now you have a potential win-win. You have this wait-and-see mode. And Florida State and Clemson are going to 100% be evaluating what their playoff access is like with whatever the new playoff format winds up being. Of course, the ACC got 2 teams into the playoff last year. The Big 12 only got 1. You have plenty of people arguing, and I understand the arguments, that in a 5+11 format with 5 automatic qualifiers and 11 at-large bids, the ACC and the Big 12 aren't going to have as much access to the playoff. There's been one proposal that's gotten tossed around a couple times where the ACC would get 3 automatic bids and the Big 12 would only get 2. All of these proposals are hanging out there, and Florida State and Clemson, who are probably the most valuable assets from a realignment standpoint that the ACC has, they're just going to sit there and wait. They're going to sit there and they're going to wait and they're going to evaluate. And you know what? It's a smart move on the part of the ACC. You keep your conference together now, something the Pac-12, RIP, wasn't able to do, and you give yourself as a league, outside of those 2 teams, a chance to show them why this is the best place for them in the long run. And it's also a win for Florida State and Clemson, because if they decide, no, this new format doesn't work, we don't like being here, there's not enough money, it's too big of a disadvantage, whatever they wind up deciding, one day they'll be able to leave, because the exit fee to get out of the ACC goes down year by year by year. But in the short term, it's far too I think it's too expensive. It's in the hundreds of millions of dollars, but then it can whittle its way down to, I think the low number is $75 million. Well, that's pretty reasonable. That's pretty reasonable. And the ACC one day would get a big payout, but of course they don't want that to happen. So if you're ACC Commissioner Jim Phillips, your priority right now has to be ensuring, whether it's a 5+11 format or a 4-4-2-2-1 or a 4-4-3-2-1 or all sorts of other half and full court traps, with the college football playoff, you have to figure out how to maximize the access to the playoff, because that's going to be your strongest pitch. You're not going to get, even with unequal revenue sharing, you're not putting Florida State and Clemson in the same category as Big Ten and SEC schools at the top of those leagues. You're not going to do it. It's not a reasonable expectation. What is a strong selling point is something I talk about a lot with regards to the pending New World Pac-12. You have to be able to sell to your membership and any potential new members as to why you should want to join the league on playoff access. And that's a big reason why I believe the 5 Mountain West schools that officially left and gave their notice of departure on June 1st, they're willing to do that because they think their access to the playoff will be stronger in the Pac-12. I happen to agree, by the way. But the ACC, if you go for the next, let's pick a 3-year window, because that's when things, at the end of that, then, mindsets can really start to shift, and then actions can come about when the media rights contracts get up in the early 2030s, which I tell you what, when you consider it's the year 2025, that's not as far away as it once felt. But I'm just going to throw it out there. This season will come and go in a flash, and all of a sudden we'll be in 2026. Anyway, realignment will never die is the point I'm trying to make there. But in the next 3 years, if the ACC is a one-bid league for 3 years in a row, oh boy, that's not going to be a great selling point for FSU and Clemson. They might look around and go, this isn't exactly what we were signing up for. We went 10-2 and didn't even sniff the playoff, Miami last year, but maybe it'd be different in a 16-team playoff, which it would have been a season ago. If you had 16 teams last year, Miami's in, and Clemson and SMU would make it a 3-bid league. That appears a lot more tenable. So if you're ACC Commissioner Jim Phillips, I guess you need to start putting some propaganda packets together. Go and tell everybody, look how hard it is to play. We have to go to Cal and Stanford and SMU, and that's very far. Use whatever selling point you need to pump up your conference. And at media days this year, sell your league. And at every opportunity that you get, push the brand of your conference. Whether that's a team, a collection of schools, the league as a whole, whatever you have to do. This needs to be the best iteration of the league that you can come up with in the next several years that gets as many teams into the playoff as possible. That might not entirely be in your control, but you've got to do anything and everything you can to get teams into the playoff and show Florida State and Clemson this is not going to be a 1-bid league every year. This won't be a 2-bid league every year. We can have 3. Maybe in some years we could get 4 teams into the league. And if you're an ACC fan that wants to see this thing stick together in the long term, you should be rooting for 2 or 3 10-11 win teams in the conference this year. You want 11-1 versus 11-1 or 11-1 against 12-0 with an 11-1 on the outside looking into the conference championship. That's a dream scenario for the ACC because you've got to be able to get them playoff access. Florida State and Clemson, if you want to prevent them in the long run from jumping to the Big Ten or SEC, maybe a super conference vibe makes it inevitable, but if you want to prevent that, you have to be able to show them you get to the playoff easier in this league than if you go to those leagues over there. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Hit me up on Twitter, all of that good stuff. So speaking of the SEC, what's good for them? What's good? What is it really the 5+11 that lets them dominate? It's not that simple. First, this episode brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA playoffs are in full swing, and every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments. Whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player, there's never been a better time to get in on the action. FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off and live. With player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays, fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. So, if you think you know what's going down when the NBA Finals roll around on Thursday, you can go bet on it over at FanDuel. And if you want to bet on college football, which you might because you're listening to or watching the show, you're a college football fan, of course, you can get win totals, you can get conference title odds, national title odds. It's all over there at FanDuel.com. Anything you want, they have got it. College football related and beyond. If you're new to FanDuel, it's the perfect time to sign up. Head to FanDuel.com and place your first $5 bet. If it wins, you'll get $200 in bonus bets. $200 bucks and bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. So recently I appeared on Chris Gordy's podcast, Locked On SEC, to talk about what's good for the SEC in the playoff. Here is how that conversation sounded.
We've talked a lot about what the SEC and Greg Sankey have discussed and a lot of the coaches and all this. And I figured, let's go outside of the SEC, get a outside perspective for our buddy Spencer McLaughlin, host of Locked On College Football. He joins us now. And Spencer, man, it was a huge topic of debate all last week at SEC meetings in Destin. The Big 12 brought it up, Brett Yormark. A lot of folks very divided on this. I'll just ask you, where do you stand on the automatic, 4 auto bids for Big 10 and SEC and everybody else gets the rest, or the 5+11 model?
Did you get one of the packets?
I did not, no. Request one.
Yeah, we'll see if they bring them to Media Days in Atlanta in July and see if we can grab one there. But, I've seen a lot of discussion about this stuff like you have, and, guys who I think are really smart and have good ideas for college football. Joel Klatt and Josh Pate both came out strongly against the 5+11 format, which is essentially an extension of what we just had. Like, if you think about it in these terms, which you haven't really for the 12-team playoff, we have 5+7, right? That's what we currently have right now. Is the SEC coming off a playoff year in which they are thrilled with what the committee did, leaving their 9-3 teams out and putting SMU and Indiana in? Last time I checked, that was no, not happy, not good with that. And there were 3 SEC teams in the playoff this past year, and a model that has garnered a lot of support. I understand why, is the 4-4-2-2-1 +3. But to me, that can raise the ceiling potentially on how many SEC teams get in, but I think it raises the floor, quite frankly. So I don't understand if your objective is let's not let the Big Ten or SEC just dominate everything, how the 5+11 is just going to allow them to completely take over. Go look at the playoff rankings for the last 5-6 years, Gordy, and what you see in there is if you had essentially a 1-16 seeded model, which is basically what 5+11 is, except you never know where the Group of 5 champion winds up getting ranked. But, a Boise State can be inside the top 15, or, Tulane a few years ago when they beat USC in the Cotton Bowl, I think was ranked like 15th or 16th or so. If you just went 1-16, there would have been years where the SEC would only get 3 teams in the playoff. And I just don't know why. I'm pro-committee. Is what it comes down to. I think most people are anti-committee, but I, was thinking about this as all these proposals are getting discussed, and I've watched the committee do what I think they should do over and over and over again. I would have left the 9-3 SEC teams out of the playoff. I would have left Florida State out of a 4-team playoff, probably not a 6, but I would have left them out of the 4-team playoff. I thought they got it right there. And I just think back to every other decision, and there's only been 1 year, Chris, where I felt like a team that could win the national championship didn't make the playoff. And it was the final year of the 4-team when Georgia lost the SEC title game to Alabama. Bama gets in with Texas, Washington, and Michigan. Georgia gets left out. That was the first time since they rolled out the 4-team playoff that I thought, wow, there's a championship caliber team that is not in the field here. Other than that, I never felt that way. Because what we forget every offseason is that college football, when you play out, 12, 13 games, you get so much information that at the end of the year, yeah, that team might have a good record. They're not winning at all. In the 12-team playoff, yeah, Indiana's a great, fun story last season. We all knew Indiana wasn't going to win the college football playoff. They weren't going to win a national championship. Should they have gotten in? I think so in the 12-team era, but I think we forget that every cycle. So I like the 5+11 idea because I think it drops the floor on what can happen. If the SEC teams beat up on each other and someone's concern is, well, so they're going to get so many teams in. Well, they could get 6 teams in easier in a 4-4-2-2-1 +3 format than they could in the 5+11. That's just my stance on it.
Yeah, I was kind of on, when this all first started, I was kind of on board with the 4 automatic bids because I was said, look, the SEC expanded, added two monster brands in Texas and Oklahoma, two teams that in a normal year should be, borderline playoff teams. And the Big Ten went out and added Oregon and USC and UCLA and big brands. And I said, those two conferences should get on the most bids, right? But then, the more I sat and thought about it, yes, I went back and looked at past years, and yeah, it would be, while, like you said, it would guarantee 4 spots to the SEC in a 16-team playoff. There are many years where an 11 plus 5 would have more SEC teams than possibly 5 or 6. My only issue with it in doing it this way, though, Spencer, is we are calling all conference champions equal, basically, by saying the 5 conference champs, you're all in. The team that wins the ACC.
No, I don't think so. I think you're saying you get in, but there's no guarantee because we've gone to straight seeding after 1 year of realizing, oh, this is a bad idea, which we all saw from the outside. We're like, wait, this isn't right. Boise State and ASU are getting top 4 seeds, and Penn State's down. Like, what? How does that make sense? And of course, it worked out well for Penn State. But the recognition of the conference championship games, I think, is just a nod to make sure that those have the same level of urgency, and I'm okay with that. I want conference championship weekend to be exciting, to have something definitively on the line, like you had in the ACC title game this past year, where you knew SMU was probably in either way, but Clemson had to win in order to get in, and then they got that. I thought that was really good, and so I think that creates a good product. I don't think it treats them all the same because it doesn't guarantee any of the seeds, right? It guarantees you get in, but you could be the 15th or 16th seed. The SEC champ is not going to be, I don't think, ever put on the same footing unless it's an unbeaten Clemson or Florida State maybe, or Miami as the ACC champ.
So you're saying just we'll keep it how it is, 1 through 16, how you're ranked at the end of the year. That's going to be that's how you would keep it in the seeding wise?
Yeah, and that's what they're going to for the 12-team playoff this year. And how crazy is this sport, by the way, that this will be next year will be our 3rd different playoff structure in 3 seasons. It'll be our 4th in 4 seasons, because last year you didn't have straight seeding. This year you do. Before last year, you had the 4-team playoff, and next year you'll be in the 16-team playoff. Like, that is a historically unprecedented sequence of events. But hey, I call it the craziest sport on planet Earth every day for a reason, because this stuff doesn't always make sense, but it is indeed great and wild. So I think straight seeding is the way to do it. I know a lot of people don't like the committee. I get it, but I just have never felt like they have screwed up so royally. And that's, again, because in the 4-team model, I would have left Florida State out. I think that was the right thing to do. In a 6-team model, no, but FSU wasn't winning that title.
Yeah, I mean, I do think them in the 12-team playoff going to straight seeding this year makes sense because, look, a lot of years the team that finishes second in the SEC, who loses the SEC championship game, is still a top 4 team. And you look at Texas last year, they took Georgia to overtime, they lose, and they fall out, and they have to go play a first-round game. And it was kind of silly because, and this is what I think for years moving forward is, a lot of times, Spencer, the team that loses the Big Ten title game or loses the SEC title game is still a top 4 team in the country. It's not their fault they had to go play an extra game. Whereas, the Big 12 champ, if the Big 12's down, whoever rolls through that conference goes, oh, well, look at us. We're the Big 12 champ. We deserve to go ahead of them. And it's like, well, no. Most years, the loser of the SEC and Big Ten title games is better than the conference champ of some of these other smaller conferences.
Yeah, and here's another thing to consider. I agree with you there. The other thing is that if you go to 4 automatic bids for the Big Ten, or especially in the SEC in recent years, because we have these super mega conferences that don't make any sense geographically. I mean, the SEC does, but you get what I'm saying. Like, because we have expanded the league so much and there's so many teams in there, there's scheduling imbalance all over the place. Missouri's schedule the last 2 years is not the same as Florida's. Texas's schedule last year is not the same as Oklahoma's, and it's the same thing this year, right? Until that cycles back through. So if you create automatic bids, you're going to base that on your conference record, right? That's the only thing to base it on. If you're saying, hey, this conference gets a set number of teams, you're going to base it on the conference record. Well, then you're going to have people upset, and justifiably so, that, hey, wait a minute. We went 9-3. But we played a way tougher schedule, but they're going to get into the playoff because they're, 10-2, or because, they went 8-4, but they only lost 2 games in conference and they finish at a certain spot. You get what I'm saying? Like, yeah. It's not as feasible when everyone isn't playing everyone, and your schedules within a conference can vary so wildly. I mean, take a look at SMU's schedule last year. Take a look at their schedule this year. They're in the same conference. It's wildly different. Wildly different. And so to just place that emphasis on the conference record, suddenly you're going to look at, schedules and say, well, wait, I know this is a better team. And this is, again, why I'm more pro committee, because they can assess these sorts of things. I know that this team over here is better with this record against that schedule than this one over there. If you're going in the auto bid fast, that's just the way that I come down on it.
So real quick, if the college football playoff committee says we're going to go 5+11, if you're Greg Sankey in the SEC, do you move to 9 conference games, or do you say we'll stay at 8 if that's the model you're going to go with?
I think 5. I think the 5+11 makes it slightly more enticing. I think if you have a guarantee you're going to get 4 in, it's more likely they go to 9 games. I don't think there's zero upside to it, though, because you can't have people, hurl accusations at the SEC. Well, you have the late season cupcake in there, and of course, it's not an accusation; it's a reality. But if you take that away, I think it only strengthens the records of those teams that are on the bubble of getting into the playoff. Is that as big of an upside as we're automatically getting at least 4 teams in the playoff every year? No, it is not. Is there still an appeal? I hope so.
Yeah, it's just interesting to look at. I don't know. Ole Miss shot themselves in the foot last year, losing to Florida. But let's just say they win.
Kentucky, they lost in Kentucky.
Both those. But let's just say they had won the Kentucky game, but their 9th SEC game was at Bama, and they lose out. You know what I mean? So it's like that extra conference game could cost you.
It could, but I think the committee might also look at it and go, well, if you're playing another game, we'll consider your 9-3. But I like you see what I'm saying? Like,
right.
It would depend on how it's received by the committee, yes. But if they look at it the way I would see it, which is, okay, if you add an extra conference game in there and then you're going 9-3, I am more inclined to put you into the playoff than under the current structure where you have 8 conference games and everybody else plays 9.
Well, right now the committee just goes, Michigan, you beat Bowling Green and Marshall and whoever, we'll put you in. So,
teams should not be in charge of scheduling, Chris. I will beat that drum until it changes. Teams should not set their own schedules. You don't have the Yankees out there saying, yeah, we're going to pass on playing the Red Sox this year. We're going to play the Orioles who stink. We're going to play the White Sox 4 times. Like, that's not how it works. Always a great time with Chris, and I tell you what, it's a pretty great time to be a fan of the California Golden Bears. Well, when you think about a top 140 player in the country who's top 10 at his position, who's got a 4-star composite grade of just over 94, surely you think of him going to Cal, right? That's what we all envision in our heads. Brian Smith, recruiting analyst in the Portal Podcast host, is here to discuss. Tommy Tofi was down to a number of schools, Brian, including the Golden Bears, who are in his backyard. Archbishop Reardon kid. I covered that high school when I was doing broadcast in college, and it's not that far. So proximity could be a factor, but you've got Utah in the fold, known for their trench play. Oregon, Tennessee, BYU, heavy hitters either on the trail, in NIL, or both. What's your reaction to Tofi going to Cal? Because Oregon had been seen as kind of the leader for a while, and if he wasn't going there, Cal wasn't going to be my pick, even though he's a Northern California kid.
If you'd have asked me that 2 months ago, I'd have said I'd been shocked. But they've been picking up some steam in recruiting. I mean, they got a kid from South Georgia that Florida State and Georgia and Clemson and everybody else had offered too. So, like, their staff gets it. They build relationships. And you got to give him credit because the list you just mentioned, for a lot of the poly kids, like, I'm going to guess he's LDS. I could be wrong, but BYU and Utah being in there, Cal getting that kid, that is awesome for them. They don't get the massive offensive tackles that offers. Like, he's probably got 40 offers. He could have went pretty much any school in the country. And there's a ton of kids from Northern California that you and I talk about on this show, on others, like you come on my show, whatever. How many times do we bring up Cal for a kid from anywhere in California? Or
I mean, not that it's a major recruit. Obviously, they have scholarship players on the roster, but not
top 200 kids.
No, not top 200 kids. Hence why we're discussing.
And that's the point. This is what you and I always talk about, why college football is the greatest sport on earth, because it's random. It is very random. Now, it's been a little less random because of NIL in some circumstances, or not. They allegedly have some NIL. I don't know enough about that program, but what I do know, based on one of my buddies, he works at a school that the recruiters had to go through him. And he's like, they put in the effort. They out-recruit other schools. They earn it. And I'm like, okay, this is somebody that has got a big-time high school program. And I'm like, okay, now I got to start paying attention to Cal. And again, you're beating out SEC schools. You're beating out programs in the Big 12. You're beating BYU's NIL is ridiculous. You have to be doing something right. This is why I follow college football. I'm glad that, I don't have any rooting interest per se, but it's more fun when teams like Cal are good, especially since the ACC has been so top heavy forever. It'd be nice to have a middle layer where teams could be like, I'm not saying it's going to become the Big 12, like that's the ultimate middle layer program building conference. But if we could have a few more 7-8 win teams in the ACC, and maybe Cal's one of those, if you keep getting trench guys like they are, Spencer, why not? Because this kid has NFL potential as maybe a guard or a right tackle. They'll figure that out at the next level. Good for Cal. Good for us. Good for college football fans.
Also has the ability to play both ways. I think he projects more as an offensive lineman because of the 6'6" size and just the amount of weight he's got on there. But the versatility, the power that he's got, this is just not somebody that Cal typically goes and gets. And to your point, Brian, I know it is early June, and I don't expect this to continue. However, as we are recording this segment, it would probably surprise a lot of people out there to know that at the moment, the California Golden Bears, according to 24/7 Sports, have a higher ranked recruiting class than the Oregon Ducks. Cal has a top 25 class at the moment. They've got 10 commits. And by the way, they're loading up on the defensive line.
Yes.
They've got a kid, Cam Brooks, in
That's
the full.
what I was talking about.
Yeah. Cam, that's a good, a darn good football player. The curious thing, and what I will always ask with Cal, because I've covered them for a very long time in this sport, are they ever going to make it pay off on the field in the long run? Like, this is a significant recruiting win, no doubt about it. And last year, they go into Auburn and beat Auburn. And then they lose to Florida State. Same team, same season. I always have that thought in the back of my head. But is the potential there? Yeah. And to your point about the ACC, it would be better for the sport if it wasn't seen as, well, it's two teams and everybody else. Like, give me a good Louisville. Give me a good Duke. Give me a good Cal. Give me SMU and Miami being good. Like, that conference being deeper, I think makes it feel a lot stronger. And this, this guy in particular, Tofi, on his own, he's not changing the entire program, but it's a noticeable step where it makes you turn your head and go, he went where? He was offered by Oregon, Tennessee, and BYU. Don't even factor in Utah, who have plenty of NIL. Those three schools have more NIL capability than Cal. But Cal clearly doesn't have none, or I don't think he would be going there. So I'm with you. I think it's a great pickup for Cal, and I think that's an awesome thing to see.
Yeah, I'm glad, and I want more of it. I want teams like Cal or Oklahoma State or Michigan State to start picking up again. It's more fun when those programs are winning, especially when in November, when they matter, when those big games, those rivalry games happen, like Utah, BYU, etc. Like BYU used to be bottom feed, like BYU, they're going to be now Utah. They've been good for a while. It's cool. Maybe it's Cal's turn to be that school. Who knows? But if you recruit players like this, obviously it's a lot easier to get that done.
Yeah, it definitely is. We're going to continue to call it on this show the Ron Rivera effect. And Brian, I want to get you out of here on this. You were telling me before we hopped on to record about a flip from Wisconsin, that one player doesn't mean everything, but one player doesn't mean nothing either. And Luke Fickell is, I think, on the hot seat if he doesn't make a bowl game this year. I think 6-7 wins, he keeps his job, but you miss a bowl game for a second year in a row at that program, they might show you the door. And it's just one recruit, but hey, it turns out Ole Miss can do more than just be portal kings, right?
Carmelo Reed. He's not a kid from Memphis. He's not from Nashville. He's not from Atlanta. He's from Chicago. 6'6", 260-pound defensive lineman who looks the part, who runs like the guy you'd want him to run like, and has the length you're looking for, committed to Wisconsin until he visited Ole Miss. That's not good. Ryan Herrings of Locked On Badgers told me about the visit when I was on his show. About 30 minutes after I was on his show, guess what I saw on my computer screen?
The old flipperoo.
That's right. Ole Miss flips him. Like, Wisconsin's recruiting is the definition of shooting one in its own foot. Like, they get one good player, then they lose. Like, it's just round and round. Their NIL is not near where it needs to be. I know that's a state political thing, in a state institution, all that. Until that gets fixed, they're in trouble. I don't care who the head coach is. We can do a whole show on this at some point. Out of all the major programs over the last 30 years, Wisconsin's probably the bottom feeder in terms of how they treat their players and their facilities and all that.
Really?
Yeah.
I would not think that about Wisconsin.
They were, for a while, probably maybe like Northwestern, the worst facilities in the Big Ten.
I suppose they didn't want Xavier Lucas to transfer for reasons that nobody can figure out.
Yeah,
and then he just showed everybody the transfer portal doesn't exist if you don't want it to.
Yeah. Well, anyway, Wisconsin's in trouble this year. Their schedule sucks, and he's in trouble anyway. But one of the ways you can get over the top if you're 5-7, 6-6, hey, we got a great recruiting class. Well, losing Carmelo Reed is not the way you do that. Because again, this is the kid they never get. I have complained, and I make fun of Ryan and tell him all the time on Locked On Badgers, it is your fault that they're not getting these defensive linemen. You need to get more of them because your defensive ends make my eyes bleed. You can't rush the passer. And then you lose the 6'6", 260 kid to a Southern program, and he's from Chicago. That's not how it works. This staff is not going to be employed if this continues because it's going to be a rough season. They play at Alabama. They got Oregon. They got all these things. Like it's going to be a rough season. I don't feel real good about them being in Badgerland much longer.
Brian Smith, longtime recruiting analyst, the Portal Podcast. Check him out on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. That's it for today. Appreciate everybody listening. I will see you next time. And until then, hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.